Hi everybody, welcome to the Camcycle September monthly meeting. I would like to introduce our guest speaker this evening, who is Sylvia. And Sylvia, I'll get you up on the screen. There we are. Hi
Hello.
Sylvia.
Good
Hi.
evening, everyone.
How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know you have been popping up everywhere on webinars and live streams because school streets are the hot topic of the moment, aren't they?
It is, yes. It's like really come to the fore as like yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're starting to get a lot more interest in Cambridge and a few schools who will be having their first school streets in just a week or so once they return. So Sylvia, I might let you do the task of introducing yourself and the School Streets program. And then I will let you have the floor and take your presentation. But I'd be particularly interested to also know just where School Streets even came from and why all of a sudden they're the hot topic all around the UK. But over to you, Sylvia. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much, Roxanne. So I'm a parent, and I had a problem with the traffic outside the school with my children. So when I started to look into the solutions that could be possible for us, that there was a few information, but it was a bit spread out. So when I did my own research, I decided to collect all this information and to put it into the website. So that's how School Street Initiative came out. And I've decided to, and then I've spoken to with other people who got a School Street, and I've just put everything together and just I thought it could help other people as well. So should I start sharing my screen?
Please do, Sylvia. And I think that's a great point you've made, that actually one of the key things here is just getting the information together, isn't it? And we shouldn't have each individual trying to come up with this on their own, because we can all learn from each other. And that's, I think, what your program's been doing. But I'll, yes, leave it to you, Sylvia. Here you go.
Thank you. So let me put it full screen. Okay, here we go. So there we go. So let's start at the beginning. So the basic definition of a school street is a timed access restriction outside a school gate, and it's only operational at drop-off and pick-up time, weekdays, and only term times only. So there's a few ways to enforce this intervention. So either with removable bollards, so this is an example on the picture on your right. This is in Westminster in London. Or you can have permanent planters, big planters, as part of a wider intervention like low traffic neighborhood. Or you can have ANPR cameras. So those are the cameras that can pick up a number plate from a car, or the police. We'll go into more detail later on as the difference between those different type of enforcement. So there's usually exemptions for residents and blue badge holders. And it's really the good thing with those schemes, it's really built around the community and the specific needs of that community. So it will be different between schemes. Some will, for instance, let go the tradesman. It's completely entirely done with the community in mind and with the engagement with the community. So it's really started in mainland Europe, in Italy, in a little town called Bolzano. And they've started in the early 90s with the 6 schools. So those are the signs that they are using. And then in Scotland in 2015, 2016, and really these kind of schemes evolved from what we had, which is play streets. This is slightly different. It's only a street that will be open for after school for children to play outside. And in Camden, so that was the first London borough to do one. And they've used bollards as well. On the technical note, so this is possible because it's basically a pedestrian and cycle zone. There's no, in the law at the moment, there's no school street as such, so they used that traffic order to do it. So depending if you use bollards or camera, obviously the cost will vary. So it will be from 5,000 to 20,000. And on top of that, you'll have the cost of the officers working the design, the signs, the lines that you have painted on the road, and the traffic orders to write. To give you a bit more context, for instance, and within the COVID context, Leeds is doing 6 school streets for 15,000. So it can be done fairly cheaply. The basics, the most important thing is because the local authority have always had the powers to implement something, because they have the power to, when they think that there's a risk or a danger to the person on the road, they can actually act. So it's not a new thing as such. So as I said, it could be either a standalone scheme in one school, or it could be part of a wider low traffic neighbourhood scheme. So for instance, that picture on the right, this is in Bristol. So they've done planters. It's important to remember that 1 in 4 cars on the road in the morning peak is related to the school run related, and also pollution at that time will triple. So that's quite important to actually address this issue. Almost half of all primary school children will be driven, and a quarter of secondary school children will be driven. And this is fairly new, because if you look back at 40 years ago, it wasn't like that at all. So there's been an increase of children being driven by their parents to go to school. Some grim statistics there. There's 14% of children killed on the roads. It was during the school run, and also later on 22% between 3 and 5. And obviously when in the winter months as well, when it's a bit darker. So there's really a strong, we really need to do something about that. So in terms of the reason why we need to do something about these, so we've known that for a long time that active travel is, or physical activity, regular physical activity, is something that is hugely beneficial to our health, and also to the wider environment. The latest document from the Department for Transport, Gear Change, the vision that has been announced lately, you've got that visual from that document, and it's pretty clear that it's just incredibly beneficial. We also know that physical activity is sometimes difficult to do as an add-on to our busy lives. So when it's embedded in our everyday life, it's just so much easier to keep at it than to start and to do it. So if you look at children have to go to school, 5 days a week. This is the perfect opportunity for them to do something regularly and to enjoy it. And also there's good evidence that good habits as children will continue into adulthood. There's also evidence that there's a link between an active travel to school and an active brain, and that it does enhance academic attainment and cognitive performance. And there's obviously a substantial percentage from the pollution that we have in our cities do come from road transport. In terms of road danger, so for the past 40 years, we've seen a decrease of the amount of time that children are outside on the road, and they've been basically removed from the roads, and this vacuum has been filled by a motor vehicle. So it's a vicious circle, because parents might think that and do feel that roads are not safe for the children, so they will increasingly drive them. This is a little illustration that exactly it's just spot on. There's a lot of parents who unfortunately think that way. And also there's been for years after years, there's a policy where it was the roads were a dangerous place and children had to be careful, and sometimes even more perverse when there is a collision and when there is injuries on a child. Sometimes there's victim blaming on that on the child, as if that child has done something wrong, and that's something that is really disturbing. There's also the aspect of the independent mobility, which is quite important. This picture on the right, when I started to look into those issues, and I came across that picture, and to me it was so, it really hit nerves, because this picture, I don't know if you can see it fully, but it pictures a family, different generation, and across almost a century, it shows you how far the children were allowed to go from their home. So for instance, we start by the great-grandfather in 1919. He was allowed to go unsupervised. He would go 6 miles from his home to go. So not only he would go by himself on the road somewhere, but he would go swimming in a lake by himself. So that was almost a century ago, 100 years ago. Then we are now at the point where the same child, the great-grandson at the same age, will only be allowed to go 300 yards from his front door. And so that's surely has huge implication into what kind of adult we are, we have and we are going to have. So if you make the environment safe for them to travel to school, we might help with this. It's worth to keep in mind as well that the average distance to school for primary age children is 1.6 miles, so it's completely walkable, cyclable, and 3.5 miles for secondary children. And children are social beings. They love being active. They always jump up and down, and this is something they really enjoy. And also there's this social aspect of walking together to school or cycling together to school, which is this little time just before, between leaving the home and going to school. And it's really nice, and it's a shame because it's almost impossible now if you are driven to school, or if the environment just outside the school is not nice. So now we have the added element of COVID. So before COVID-19, there were about 131 schools across the UK, school streets, across the UK, at various degrees, either going through the stage of consultations or being made permanent. And so since May the 9th, when the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps, announced all those measures to help with distancing, and when really from the government now it is established that active travel is something that really should be granted a bigger priority. School Street was one of the measures that were announced at that time. So a lot of local authorities have started to look into this. Some of them already had programs going, and others had absolutely no idea. So it's been a bit of a rush, but there's quite a lot of schemes now coming up and quite a lot of interest. And even in the media, there's been an increase. I've noticed that there's been an increase of interest and articles written about it, and even on TV and radio. So now we went through the lockdown, and now we are going to the restart. So September, it's today, September, and in a week. I mean, in Scotland, they've already started, I think, school, but in England, it will be next week. So we've been urged to actively travel to school. Both the school minister and Grant Shapps again have reiterated this, that wherever possible, we do need to get our children to walk or cycle to school. Now, obviously, there's a reduced capacity in public transport, and we do not want to see an increase of car use for trips like that. Before COVID, it was quite horrendous already. So if it gets worse, it's just going to be impossible. And also, obviously, if you followed a little bit what was happening, the government made available some funds, some money for local authority to implement those schemes. So as I said, some local authorities had already plans and programs. They already had a list of potential sites where they could implement school streets. Others had to start from scratch. So there's now an emergency school street. So that would be the same process, but with temporary materials. So instead of having bollard, they would have different type of barriers, and they would be using different processes as well. It would be experimental traffic orders under the Traffic Management Act 2004, Section 18. So that means that the implementation will be at the same time as the consultation period. So it's a good way to approach consultation and engagement, because it's actually in a live situation. So it will give people a good idea of how it works, how people feel about it, and in practice how it works. I think it's better. So at the moment, there's the other issue of the enforcement. So at the moment, only councils, London Council can use ANPR camera. There's been calls from various bodies who wanted to see those powers extended to councils outside London, because it just makes sense. And if you are not able to use the powers to enforce the specific traffic offence, which is the moving vehicle offence, if you cannot enforce that, that means you have to rely on the police, and the police are stretched. They have, other priorities. It's not reliable because they could be at the site monitoring and enforcing the scheme, and then they will be called out. So it's just not practical for the local authorities outside of London to do them. It just gives them more flexibility. They could do it with the cameras. So the government finally has announced that they will enable effective enforcement of School Street outside of London by giving local authorities the powers that they were missing. So that's really great news. We have no timing as to when this is going to happen. I was hoping that it would be in time for September, but it's not the case. But hopefully it will come soon. Whoops, I went back, sorry. So we know that school streets work at achieving the intended aim. So as I said, the first one in the UK or in Scotland, like 5 years ago now. So there's quite a lot of data to look at. And thankfully, there's been a research paper report recently produced by Professor Adrian Davis. He evaluated the evaluation reports of 16 schemes, one of which was in Belgium, and there was one PhD research as well. So now we've got some fresh evidence and data to use. I'll go down into the different types of evidence that's been using in the following slide. So we do know that parents wanted research after research. That's always one issue that always comes up. Parents say that they don't feel safe. It's just not nice. It's horrendous. It's noisy, it's polluted, it's not safe. So there's a strong case. Parents want that. The residents, obviously, they don't want that. They don't want to have that. So there's an example on the slide on the right. They don't want to see that just outside their front door. They don't want their, if they do have a vehicle, sometimes they're blocked in. It's just not nice at all. And obviously school staff wanted to, because they spend a lot of time having to deal with that, and they are not traffic warden, they are teachers, and they want to teach. They don't want to start their day with having an argument with a parent who is idling outside the school or parking appallingly somewhere, blocking access for the children. And so we are told to avoid, we are urged to cycle or walk if possible. So, we need to have safe space to do that. There's also a lot of schools who have school gates perhaps on narrow pavements. So parents have been asked to distance. They want to be safe, so they might spit out on the road. So they need to have this safety that will allow them to do that. And there's obviously more and more evidence between links between the lack of active travel and pollution. If you do get COVID, it will impound your recovery. So this is to go back to the report by Professor Adrian Davis. So it's called School Streets Closures and Traffic Displacement Project. So they've basically compared the evaluation reports made by the local authority. They've also conducted interviews with the different persons who were involved and parents. So that's quite an important report, and it's been done in collaboration with Fastrans, the Road Safety Trust, and the Transport Institute. So, I mean, I would recommend that you read the report. It's very interesting. I've just picked up a bit of a summaries of what they found. So they found that there was strong evidence on. It's quite interesting that, because we always, when we look at road danger, the pattern is always to look at the statistics of collisions. but actually the perception of danger is rarely measured. And this is something that is extremely important for parents, and that sometimes this is what they will say. They will say, "Oh, it feels safer when they do get to School Street." This is not something that is measured in statistics of casualties. So the perception of danger and the safety risk, they were the key motivator for the School Street. Then there was a strong evidence that there was an increase in children being traveling actively to school. There was strong evidence that there was no displacement caused by a scheme implemented in a school, because that's one of the concerns. Sometimes parents or residents might think, oh, if that road is not accessible in the morning, will that create more traffic somewhere else? And apparently there's strong evidence that this is not the case. In terms of medium evidence, so there's a total number of motor vehicles across school closure and neighbour street reduced. So that's medium, but still existing. There's some more active travel. There's supported by the majority of parents or residents. So that's medium evidence that this is the case. And also that the perceived road safety on surrounding streets improve. So that's a very interesting report. So where is this all happening at the moment? So it's very difficult. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but it's quite difficult to keep track of everything happening. So Sustrans did a map, and I think they've only put there what they could survey. So it's only the schemes that have been implemented. There's probably a lot of other schemes that are still in a pipeline and not yet there. I think there was about 53 School Street implemented across the UK, but this is outside of London. And for London, I've looked up there's a journalist from who sometimes writes for The Guardian, Laura Baker, who kindly did a list of all the allocation and the funding. And there were about 483 School Street listed. So that's the schemes for which local authority did get a positive response on their bid. So we'll see how many do come up and when. This is normally for the allocation for the funding to do it before the end of September. It is a huge number, but it is true that there's 3,000 schools in London, so we'll see. It will make a difference. So in terms of materials used, so on the left, you've got removable bollards by Westminster, and there's also ANPR camera. So ANPR camera, there's no physical barrier, it's just a camera that will pick up the number. If you go through the zone without an exemption, you will get a fine in the post. It's all automatic. And there's a white list with people, so either you're blue badge holders or you are residents, so obviously that will be dealt with against that list. In terms of materials used, so you could use cones, you can use temporary barriers, or you have those foldable barriers. So the staff will put it out and either man it or go back to the school gate and then put it back after the pickup or drop off time. So what are the challenges? So obviously, I think most people would agree that the cameras are probably the best way to enforce them, because you completely free the school staff of doing the putting them out and putting them back in. It also kind of relieves the school in saying this is a council-led scheme. If you have any issue with it, just see with the council. So it kind of cuts short the discussion with, if away from conflict with people who might disagree with the scheme. So at the moment they are using those temporary physical barriers. Sometimes enforcement might be an issue. What it will be the level of compliance. The school times, most schools would have implemented some sort of staggered school times to have different bubbles. They work on bubble spaces with different groups coming at 5 minutes apart. So obviously, instead of having like a 40, 50 minutes drop off pickup time, it would be a much longer period. So again, that might be difficult for some schools with shortage of available staff. So maybe parents could volunteer and deal with those barriers. That's one solution. The process used within that COVID period is a different type of consultation. And as you know, from the moment that those measures were announced and the moment that they were mandated to implement them, it was quite a short time. So it is maybe not enough time to explain properly what this is and the principles of it. So this might cause some problems. How do we deal with that? And this is temporary. A lot of them are emergency school streets at the moment. So how do we make the case to keep them in a permanent way? So the solutions. Well, it's always about, communication. People have to be explained. It's just simple. It's a simple idea. And if you explain to people, a lot of them will actually understand because it is an obvious thing to do. There are issues and a lot of people, there's a consensus now. People do understand those issues. And this is a solution. This is part of, there's plenty of other solutions, but this is one of them. So I think if you continue to discuss something, to share information, to show how it works somewhere else. There's quite a lot of videos out there of schemes and how they work and how parents react to them. If you do have a school street near where you would like one for your school, maybe if possible, go and ask your head teacher to visit that one and to speak to his pair at the other schools, and maybe they can, discuss the benefits and all the little thing that they may be thinking, oh, I can't do that because of this or this, and then that might be easier for them. There's quite a lot of tools and resources out there. There's living streets, Sustrans, the map that I've shown earlier, so you can have a look what's happening near you. There's a common place if your local authority has contracted common place to have a platform specifically for your area. Mums for Longs, they have a very good template for both permanent schemes and emergency scheme. Come September, I think there's going to be a few more campaigns coming up around pollutions and active travel. There's quite a lot of ideas on the schoolstreets.org.uk website with downloadable free resources. Just print them out, adapt them to your own schools. Use every opportunity at the school to, start the conversation and talk to parents. Create a group of parents just leading and becoming a champion for a school street. If you do engage with professionals, with council officers, there's the very good Hackney School Street toolkits. So the link hopefully will be put down in the chat. So this is not just for London boroughs, it's for everywhere. They've got case studies, they've got data, they've got everything. It's a brilliant resource. There's TfL produced quite a lot of information about that. Obviously, it's specifically aimed at London, but there's quite a lot of information that could be useful for outside of London too, with the benefits and stats and figures. So if you looked on the Street Space London website, there's appendices, and the appendix 8 is from page 20. There's quite a lot of information that can be useful. And yeah, continue the conversation with head teacher, the wider school community, the parents, the businesses, residents. And if you do get a school street at the moment as an emergency school street, do document if you can, do talk to people, continue the conversation afterwards, just to record that what difference did he make to the parents, and how do they feel about that new scheme. And yeah, that's about it. So thank you very much. So you can find me on info@schoolstreet.org.uk, or on the website schoolstreets.org.uk, and I'm on Twitter as well over there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation and clearly so much experience to share on, I think, the details of what is it that you actually need to do for a school street, but also how do you win over some of the local hearts and minds. But I think what's great is that we're seeing that evidence coming through now, which really helps to make the case locally. So we'll just let our viewers on Facebook catch up with us. There's a slight delay, and let's see what questions we have coming through. But we've certainly generated a bit of conversation while you've been speaking with people suggesting where they'd like to see school streets in their local community, and perhaps who might be the more challenging people to convince. And we sort of have Yasmin talking about kiss and ride zones, which seem to be almost the opposite of school streets, where you drive your child right up to the door and push them out of the car and drive on. Excellent. So we've got our first question that's come through, Sylvia. So Yasmin would like to know more about how you win over parents at your school. Do you have any advice on how to win the parents over?
I think again, it's to start a conversation. I think you will find that a lot of people do have an idea, and they do support measures to reduce pollution. Pollution is one of the things, thanks to maybe XR kind of groups and actions. I think there is a lot of much more awareness now about those issues, and this is part of it. And also it's just to show them the different, I mean, there's quite a lot of evidence with active travel as well. Depending on the age as well, you can tap into, how it was for them when they used to go to school. Not so long ago, we used to go to school in a way that was completely different from now. And it wasn't such a chore, I think. So it's basically to talk to them, show them the evidence. Maybe if you could, again, see if there's a scheme nearby and try to have someone to come to your school to speak about it and to see what difference it made to those parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it can be worrying at first to think that how do we convince all of these people? But I think we're seeing more and more. There are actually a lot of quiet supporters out there who maybe are not being heard. And we have the Bike is Best research that came out, which shows that for each person that opposes local changes for cycling in their neighborhood, 6.5 people do support that. And I think maybe we need to go into schools feeling a bit more confident that actually there probably is a lot more support than we might realize. And also, this isn't even your average cycling scheme. This is about keeping children safe from air pollution, road danger.
And the children as well, harvest their power because they completely get it. If you ask children, you involve them in even doing a count outside the school, how many comes by car, how many comes by, just you can do that and involve the school. Sometimes it could be like a little project on the side. The children completely get it. It's just, if you ask them, they will come up with slogans and, they will do a logo for you. It's just incredible.
Yep. It's and I think that just children saying, I'd much rather ride my bike to school, I'd much rather walk to school with my friends than sit in the car. But also I think that we have to start this at primary age, but if you can get your children actively traveling to school at primary age, then when it gets to secondary school, they're more likely to have independence and travel to school independently. And I think for a parent, that's a big boost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a question from Tom, and Tom says that Cambridgeshire won funding for a school street for every school, or at least a school street was offered to every school in Cambridgeshire, but only 9 schools moved forward. Do you have any thoughts on what might have gone wrong there, or whether it's too late to turn this around? Now, I might have a bit of an answer for that as well, but I'll let you share your thoughts first, Sylvia.
Well, I do think the teachers are completely, because I know that it's been really heavy for schools to reorganize everything. So they have a strict timetable now in the morning. It's even less flexible than it was. So I think some head teachers, some schools may have thought this is just going to take one staff away from the duties that we've assign him to her or her. So I think this is primarily that. I think they just think we won't have the time to do that, and fair enough.
Yeah, I can confirm that is at least part of the case for Cambridgeshire. More than 9 schools did initially express interest in our school streets schemes, but then when it was great, you're interested, here's what you have to do, and that was the point where for many schools it just wasn't an option at all. And really, I think that the schools where it has been successful, at least I know one local school, St Philip's, it's been the parents who are doing the organising. So I think that if we want more schools to take this up, it really needs to be coming from the parents that we're willing to take on the volunteer organising for this program. And if head teachers, governors know that there is the support from parents to keep the program going, I think that would help a lot. I think some of the other issues are the initial risk assessment reveals other issues which need to be resolved before a school street program can be put in, and there's quite a lot of work there. So it's not just about the volunteers, but actually more substantial changes would need to be made to the road environment before this can be done, and that's something definitely right now I just don't think schools and the council are quite ready to do. But what we need to do is get those risk assessments happening proactively and get those parents activated and ready to say we will do this. We've had a response from Yasmin who says that getting the children to do traffic counting is a genius idea. So Yasmin, will you be doing helping to coordinate some hopefully not child labour to do traffic counting? I'm thinking maybe Camcycle should develop a program to help maybe get children putting their cases forward. Have we got any more questions for Sylvia coming through? I'm just checking Twitter and Facebook as well. As I mentioned, I'm a bit short on hand, so slightly more multitasking than normal here. So we've had a comment about the school run, that it is often part of a multi-destination journey, or it's on a non-linear route. Let's just start with the first question. Multi-destination journey. So mum or dad is dropping the kids off before driving to work. How does that work with school streets? Do you find that those people object to it, or they find a way to work around it if they're doing these multi-destination journeys?
Well, I mean, there are solutions to this as well. You can, it could be the opportunity for you to look how you could do that differently, perhaps, or in a different way. I mean, for instance, that was my case, and that's why I got a cargo bike, because I would pick up. So I had one at nursery, one at primary, which was different borough, and then going to work in central London. So I would drop the first one, then the second one, and I would leave the cargo bike at the school. I mean, that was possible because we had a little space, but that's something you could discuss. And then I would jump on the tube. So, I mean, that's the thing. You have to look at what other solutions. All of those schemes, it's to kind of, you need to consider that, the obvious is maybe not the car. So it's just to kind of think about that. But I do know that's one of the reasons some parents would do that. But regardless, even if you do genuinely, there's no other options for you than to take the car. There's no reason why you should park outside the school gate. You can park somewhere else, walk 2 minutes, drop the child, and then, that's the thing. Because if someone choose or drive to school, this has consequences on other people who have no say in that. So it's just, you have to kind of, think your needs, yes, but also what other people need. And children they don't have any other choice but to go to school, and also to use that road to go to that gate. So that's just a matter of safety and just general courtesy and consideration for other people as well.
Yeah, and I think particularly in Cambridge, so many people cycle to work, and we have so many cargo bikes, trailers, child seats on bikes, and often the bike is, or a form of cycle, is the easiest option for a multi-destination journey. It's easier to get off the bike and quickly walk the kids to school than it is to use a car. And what we need to see are more workplaces providing cycle parking for cargo bikes to make that easier. It's easier to park the car than it is to park the cargo bike. But if we need to think of all those destinations being cycle friendly, and a lot more people can do that. And they will be encouraged to use the bike once they know it's actually easier to do all those drop-offs than it ever was with the car.
If I could just also people seem sometimes to forget that the trip, even by car, it's not simply from one place to the next. You have all the time when you know, if after the school run you want to pick up something from the grocery or, you know, do an errand, it will take time to find a place to park, possibly pay for that. You know, there's all those little things in between at the either end of that trip that people seems to not take into consideration into the entire trip. So if you do cycle, it's so much easier. You don't have to worry about any of this.
Yeah, yep. I think as long as your workplace is within a cyclable distance, and actually that often that's further than people would realize, and the better the infrastructure gets, the further you can cycle to work. But if you could cycle the distance to work, then all those destinations between are going to be easier by bike. So then the other question we've got here is, bear with me because we're reading this together. On a non-linear route poorly served by public transport and infrastructure, why is it a primary sustainable transport target over simple, linear, well-served commutes? Okay, that one's getting a bit complicated. We might leave that one. But interesting because we've had Carolyn Criado Perez has been CC'd on that tweet. So I'd be quite interested to see her perspective, because we do know that if often the primary parent is a mother and they have different types of journeys with more destinations along them. But as we see in the Netherlands, more women cycle than men, and that is because of the ease for doing those multiple short stops during the day. That typical commuting infrastructure isn't built for. We're veering off school streets, but I do think it all ties together that school streets are hugely beneficial if you have the primary responsibility for all those small journeys during the day and you can do it by bike.
You saved a lot of time. That's one other thing. I think Rachel Alfred did a study on this. The time that women in particular, because they do a lot of the, you know, picking up and dropping off, you gain a lot of time on your day if you actually have a, you know, a proper efficient way to do all that, because you are the one doing all the multi-trip and stops. So that's something that again is not often measured.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some reports here of cycling being faster than driving to school. Yes. And we've got a conversation started about how far did you have to travel to school? So we're hearing lots of that from everybody. But let me check in on these questions now. So we've got some talk from, I'll just say this, that Yasmin would like to coordinate some traffic counting. And how do we parents talk to the county about the school streets scheme, and that head teachers are so overwhelmed at the moment? So it's probably one for me. Camcycle is really building up a school streets campaign. So our monthly meeting tonight is just the start of it. And once we've finished this talk, I'll provide a few more resources and what Camcycle is doing to help. But Yasmin, if that's something that you'd like to do, I think Camcycle can definitely help you there. And if we can sort of package up what a lot of people are asking for and help communicate with the county, that might help reduce the workload for head teachers and county officers as well. Sylvia, another question we've had is back about winning parents over. What are the most common pushbacks from your experience or from those who you've worked with? What do you find the biggest objections are?
It really depends. I think sometimes you have a situation when the school is on board, the parents are on board, but then the council isn't, or it's the other way around. The council is really happy to do it, and then the school is a bit reluctant. So it really depends. I think, I mean, again, as you said, from the bike is best. I think this is quite common. I think that there is a majority of people who are not opposed to it, but you know, it's difficult to have conversation about, because you come, you drop your children off, and then it's really difficult to have that space to fully discuss it. But I mean, from my experience, it's a handful of parents who are really the problem. because and to be honest, I think that in human behavior there's always a little percentage of people, they will never agree with you, whatever you say, whatever brilliant the case is. So I think you should just spend your time on the people who are willing to listen and to try and to see how you can make things better, because we are all parents and we are all people, and we want the best. We don't want to make life difficult or worse, or create situation where the health of the children is not taken into consideration and as a priority. um, it really depends, but that's the thing, it's by having all those conversations that you will see exactly what is the stumbling block, who is actually blocking those things, and then you can adapt a response, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that actually, and we touched on this earlier, we have to trust. We know that there is going to be enough support for these schemes. So when there are those pushbacks, those objectors, it's not necessarily about convincing them. It's about finding out what are the tactical issues that they might be dealing with. How can that be resolved? This is sensible feedback that we need to think about for our scheme, or actually just continue with that positive promotion, working with the school, with the parents that are on board. Again, this is about air pollution, making sure that our children are not breathing in toxic fumes that are giving them asthma and other respiratory diseases. This is about reducing road danger so our children aren't being hit by cars when they're walking to school. And this is about making people's lives easier in the long run in the local community and those going to the school by reducing the traffic chaos. I just don't think there would be many people who could consistently object. I don't think there'll be a majority of people objecting to a scheme when you put forward those points. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think you would have seen that. Have you heard of any school streets programs where objectors have successfully crushed the idea?
Actually, yes, but I think it's because, and that's the weirdest thing. We don't know for sure, but the return we got was, I think it was a misunderstanding of the scheme, because they were afraid. And the residents wanted the exact same thing. They had enough of the people parking wherever and the excess traffic twice a day. So people were really angry, and that's why the council decided to try to do it, that scheme at that location. But there's been a miscommunication. I don't know whether it was from the councillors, I don't know, but yes, I did see a scheme that the people, that was before COVID, so there was a consultation prior to the implementation, and they decided not to want it. So I don't know.
So it does happen. It does happen. Yeah, but also that's where you're using the experimental traffic orders to get it in place, because I think that it's so hard to imagine something that you have never seen before. And that's where, yes, we need to do consultation in advance, but at some point it just gets to the stage where you've got to put something on the ground so that people can understand it. Because when it's on paper, it's easy to object. It's easy to believe it would never work. We just need to put it in place with the promise that it can be tweaked as it goes. And I think that would get most people on board when they see how it works. And I think also what we've got now is a lot more evidence about other schemes and showing that we don't get the displacement of traffic and road danger that people have been afraid of. I think that's one of the biggest objections that we can counter that now.
Yeah. And to get back to yes, sometimes there will be cases where parents, they don't have any other options. So I was thinking also, because this is a school community, sometimes you will stay with the same parents and the same children for years. So there is a community, and we can help each other. So you could have a walking bus, a cycling bus, parents could help that way. So you take turns. There's always other solutions, and it's actually richer if you do that together, because this is what this is about. It's a group of children growing up together, going to the same school, and it's just nicer.
Yeah, and I think that also ties into one of the other questions we had about why did only 9 schools take up this program? But that was very much the county saying, do you want this? Let us know now. And actually, for it to be successful, it should be the parents organizing themselves and saying, we're here, we're ready to do this. Now let's go to the county and ask to do it, or ask the school and then ask the county. That, I think, is a much more compelling order of events. rather than a school during a very hectic time being offered something that they have to snap up very quickly, whether they're ready to or not. And I think we'll see a lot more take up. And I think also once some schools start getting this, more schools will want it and more local people will be asking for this. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, which just shows our School Streets page on the Camcycle website. So let's get that up. There's always lots of buttons. There we go. So we have a School Streets page on the Camcycle website, and that will refer to a lot of the resources that Sylvia has kindly mentioned this evening. And I've also got a range of links from Sylvia that I'll put up there tomorrow to help people. So there's so many great resources nationally already, but what we'll do is start putting together everything that works for Cambridge. So national resources, local news. As we get more groups working together in Cambridge, we'll be able to share their contact details on here. So this is very much a live page about school streets for Cambridgeshire. So do take a look at this. Do let us know if you find anything else that's useful to put on there. But watch this space. That's where all the school streets Cambridgeshire information will be put. We will turn that into a campaign. So I think that is it. Let me check one final check for the questions. We've got lots of thank yous. So we'll do our virtual clapping. Thank you, Sylvia. I can see you're in the dark there, so it's time to go. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for joining us this evening, for your fantastic advice, information and resources, and all the incredible work you've been doing to push the School Streets programme along. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen lots of webinars and talks where you've spoken, and thank you so much for all of that great work.
Thank you very much for having me, and good luck with your programme.
Thank you. Well, hopefully you'll be able to include a Cambridgeshire example in your future presentations. That would be fantastic.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Sylvia. I'll let you go, and I will pop on to the rest of the Cambridge campaigning updates now. I mean, you're welcome to sit and watch as well if you like.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sylvia. Bye. Okay, everybody, I will put my screen back up and continue with our Cambridge updates. So thank you to Sylvia. If anyone has got any questions about other campaigning activities or news, or if you've got updates, now is the time to put those in the comments, and I will get up a few of the news items from the last month right now. And it's so sad, because this is normally the time where we would open up the floor at our Camcycle meeting and ask various people from our membership to give their updates. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to be as good as our Jim Chisholms, our Matt Danishes and so on. So bear with me, and I'll do my best to give you the best updates. So we just talked about School Streets. So there's that website again, and we also have some more information about School Streets in our upcoming magazine. But in other big news, we have what we've called our Spaces to Breathe campaign, which has been all about getting space for safe cycling, walking, and quite literally breathing, having the space to be safely distant from other people during the pandemic. And we now have some more things on the ground to show you. We have seen some modal filters installed in a number of locations around Cambridge. So I believe this one is, I've managed to get my slides in the wrong order. So this would be Carlisle Road or Luard Road. My apologies, I've got them mixed up. But there we go, we have our traffic filters going in. Unfortunately, not as beautiful as some we may have seen in other places. We don't have planters and so on, but what we do know is these concrete barriers are not going to be easily moved. So perhaps there's a positive there, but I do know that we'd certainly like them to be a bit more attractive. We also have Nightingale Avenue that has gone in there, and we have Stories Way, which has had some bollards put in. So they're just a few of the examples. We can also report that the barriers on Mill Road have also been installed. Sorry, the bus gate cameras on Mill Road have also been switched on, and we've certainly seen an improvement in the traffic volumes, speed and behaviours on Mill Road following the switching on of the bus gate cameras. And I believe the signage on Mill Road has also been improved, so that it doesn't just say road closed. It gives a bit more information to entice people down the road to visit the shops and so on. In other news, some great photos. Well, I'll just check first if we got any questions coming through on Facebook, any reports about modal filters. Being confirmed, that was Carlisle Road that I showed a picture of. And we've got some good comments from Liz saying that there will be time to make these pretty, but experience from elsewhere shows that sturdiness is more important. And I think you might be right there, Liz, that we just need to make sure they're safe, they're in place, but hopefully the council can work with local residents to perhaps put some planters in or have some kind of scheme to make them more attractive. But yes, functionality may be more important at this stage, because we have seen a number of the planter barriers in London be repeatedly vandalized and destroyed. But it certainly shows if we're getting the pushback that real change is happening. Right, I will move on to some other exciting news, which is that we have more progress on the Chisholm Trail and the Chisholm Trail Bridge, the Abbey Chesterton Bridge, and the jetty that goes underneath them all. So thank you to our member Ken. He's been taking some amazing photos nearly every day to show us the progress. So here we can see the jetty of that goes underneath the bridges. So it's now connected to both sides. And it certainly, to me, looks a lot safer and a lot easier to navigate than what we had there previously. Here's the view from the other side. And we can have a close-up which shows the brickwork that's connecting the ends of the jetty to the banks there, looking a lot like a functional underpass, and a bit of a close-up so we can see what the handrail and the railing will look like. So thank you to Ken for keeping those pictures coming through. We don't have a date yet for the lifting in of the bridge, but rest assured, as soon as we have a date, we will be sharing that with our members, and we've been told there'll be drone footage and all sorts of things happening when that's installed, but at this stage we still don't have a hard date for the bridge. We're all waiting. We have some questions here about do we know when the tranche 2 measures will be announced? We've had some general information about that, but we haven't got anything that's quite detailed about what will be going in. But we'll try and get a bit more information in our next weekly update or our blog posts to talk about tranche 2. But I need to just go and have a proper look and find out what is officially announced, what will be happening when. But I do know that there's been some progress with tranche 2, so I will share news on tranche 2 of the temporary COVID measures once we know about it. And yes, we keep getting asked about when they're going to open the Chisholm Trail and the Chisholm Trail Bridge, but we just don't have confirmed dates yet. But I think we'll be shouting it to everyone near and far once we know that. Other things that have been happening in the last month is cycle theft has literally been front page news in Cambridge. So that's my quote: cycle theft, city bike theft must be taken more seriously. So we came out quite strongly in the Cambridge Independent last week on the issue of cycle theft. There's been a lot of action from local people talking about their issues with cycle theft, not only the prevalence, the frequency with which bikes are being stolen, but the lack of action that has been taken by police. And there's just this overwhelming sense that this just isn't being taken seriously in Cambridge. And some statistics have been gathered to estimate that the value of bikes stolen in Cambridge every year could be easily as much as £2 million worth. So this is a big, costly problem for people in Cambridge. So we've been making a lot of noise about that. The Cambridge Independent, it's put it on the front page, it's on their website. And I am in process of arranging meetings with police and crime commissioners, MPs, heads of the police, councillors, people responsible for the cycle point at the train station. So cycle theft is a really big issue at the moment. If you have a story about your bike being stolen, do share it. I will say this, our advice, make sure you know the frame number of your bike, make sure you have a good description of your bike, make sure you lock your bike with a high quality lock to a good, safely installed cycle stand. And if your bike is stolen, do report it to the police. Even if you think it's not a worthwhile activity for you, we need those statistics about cycle theft. Because at the moment, the police are saying cycle theft is down 55% on this time last year, and they could use that to show success, or there is less need to deal with this issue. If people aren't reporting their bikes stolen, the data just isn't there to put energy into the issue. So do all of that. But I will say, we do know that it doesn't matter often if you're under CCTV, if you have 2 of the best quality locks and you know all the information about your bike, it's still very difficult to protect it from theft and to get the police to do anything. But let's at least do what we can. So cycle theft, a big issue at the moment. In other news, we've got some consultations that we need to bring to your attention. So there is the consultation on the highway code, and I do recommend popping onto our blog, where one of our trustees, Matthew Danish, has written an excellent blog post about just one of the recommendations we're making for the highway code consultation, which is that we should be allowing for people to cycle side by side, and making that very clear in the highway code that cycling side by side is important and is safe cycling behavior, and that people driving should respect that. And I think that's more important than ever. You know, we've just been talking about school streets. We're expecting parents to be cycling their children to school. Being able to cycle side by side is a vital part of doing that safely. So we're making these recommendations for Rule 66, that it should instead say ride in single file when drivers wish to overtake. No, my apologies. I can't quite read what I've got here. So I say go and have a look at our blog. We've put the specific writing up there. One of the recommendations is to change Rule 66 to enable side-by-side cycling, but there are also a number of other recommendations that we'll be putting forward over the coming weeks. In the interim, you can also look at Cycling UK's website. They're certainly putting in a lot of work on what the highway code should be saying as a result of this consultation, and they've made it easy for you to respond as well. But do watch this space, because I think that Camcycle is possibly putting forward slightly different recommendations to Cycling UK. We're certainly going in a lot stronger on being able to ride side by side. And I'll just say thank you so much to Matthew Danish for putting that blog post together, and for the excellent thought that he has put into that. I just think it shows the value that we have at Camcycle for putting forward progressive ideas about cycling. Yes, Matthew's just pointed out that what I've put on here is the government's weak test. That's right. I thought I was showing what we were recommending, but it's not. It's what the government is saying, which is really not good enough, recommending that we ride in single file so drivers can overtake. It's very unclear, and it could certainly be interpreted in a poor way, that we should somehow be able to read the mind of the driver behind us and know that they wish to overtake, and therefore we'll move into single file. So it's just not good enough. Have a look at our blog, and please do respond. And then announced over the weekend, another consultation from the government, which is the pavement parking consultation. We're in the process right now of finishing up editing our blog post about this issue. So we'll have our recommendations very soon, but this is great news that the government is consulting on this. Hopefully they follow that up with some real action, some real changes to I guess you could say, outlaw pavement parking and make it possible for local authorities and all the police to actually do something about it. So there's the website for the government's consultation. And do keep an eye on our blog and read our weekly update text in the coming weeks, and we'll tell you more about that. But at last, something about pavement parking. Okay. Also, more locally, we have the Northeast Cambridge Area Action Plan consultation. It is a bit of a mouthful, and it is a huge consultation for a huge proposed development in Cambridge. It is going to take a team effort to deal with the amount of information we need to go through for this consultation. So please do join us. There's our Cyclescape thread there. Please do join the conversation. If you've got an opinion about anything for this consultation, please do share it. Anna has also put together a really fantastic blog post that just explains how to deal with the consultation and gives some headlines about what is proposed for the Northeast Cambridge area. So do take a look at that. It's on our blog. You can find it if you follow that link. There's so many posts there of relevance at the moment, so go look at the blog. But broadly, the Northeast Cambridge Area Action Plan is about 8,000 new homes, 20,000 new jobs in the Northeast Cambridge area. So that's near the science, between the Science Park and the train station where the waterworks is at the moment, up towards the A14. And this is quite a high density development that's being proposed, and they've got some very bold aims about sustainability. But of course, how can you have a zero carbon development when you still allow 4,000 cars into it? So we need to take a good look at the traffic planning, traffic management, access into and out of the site. How does that connect to local cycle routes? What pressure will it put on them? Do we think it's realistic that this development can work with that many people with the proposed road layouts and car parking arrangements? So do take a look. Some of the things that they are proposing are quite positive. So talking about all streets having design speeds below 20 miles per hour, primary streets having 4-meter wide footways, and 2.5 meter segregated cycleways, that people using footways and cycleways will have priority over vehicular traffic in the main carriageway, and plans to design secondary streets like the Mini Holland or the Woonerf style from the Netherlands, so more of a place street or a cycle street design. So we're seeing some positive words there, but it's really important that we take a really good look at the detail there, and we're going to need some help because there is a huge amount to go through. And I think that people will be interested in this development for issues other than cycling and transport as well. So do take a look. Also, there'll be more information about this in our magazine if you look at page 44. Which brings me to our magazine, which is being distributed next week, and it is also available on our website now. So you can go and take a look on our website, and the theme for this edition of our magazine is Working for Change. And what we have in there is lots of information about school streets, and also a lot of information about the government's announcements, which we touched on at the last monthly meeting, but we've got the government's gear change vision. They've released the local transport note 1/20, which is the cycle infrastructure design guide. So there's a lot of information about that, as well as the highway code consultations and a number of other consultations the government's released. So this is absolutely jam-packed. And while I've got the floor, I will just say another huge thank you to everybody who has submitted content for this magazine, who has written articles, to our amazing volunteers who have done all the copy editing, to our volunteers who have edited the magazine, put it together, and to Anna and Rosie for their incredible work on the magazine this edition. Again, in tough circumstances while we're in the pandemic and we're not all working as normal, a great effort from everybody for another excellent edition of our magazine. So look at, that'll be coming your way next week, and it's also available online if you just can't wait that long. And also announced in our magazine is the date of our next AGM. So please put this date in your diary. It's 2 p.m. Saturday, the 23rd of January, 2021. And unfortunately, we just cannot safely plan for an in-person AGM at this stage. So that will be an online AGM, and we'll have more details coming out to members in due course, but do prepare for an online AGM. We'll be enabling online voting as well. And if circumstances change and there is something that we can do in person, we'll make sure that we plan some kind of social around that time, so that we still get our in-person catch up. But at this point, the best we can do is an online AGM. But while we're talking about AGMs, we must also talk about trustees. So if anybody is interested in finding out more about being a Camcycle trustee, then do get in touch. You can have a conversation with me or with one of our trustees. Email contact@camcycle.org.uk. And we're very, very interested in hearing from a wide range of people. And don't think you need to be trustee material to be a trustee. What we need to do is make sure we reflect our community of people who cycle or who could cycle. That's the most important thing. And just have a chat with us and we'll tell you more about what being a trustee is like. The trustees recently completed our annual governance survey where we find out what is it like to be a trustee, and trustee satisfaction is very high. So it's a very, very rewarding role to be a Camcycle trustee. So do get in touch if that sounds interesting, if you'd like to help set the strategic direction of Camcycle for the coming years. And I can say that next year is going to be an incredible year now that we have all these amazing announcements from the government. There's real impetus to go and get things done. And so thank you so much to everybody for sticking around and listening, whether you're watching us live or you're joining us later on. Please get in touch if you would like to get involved in School Streets or any of our other campaigning that we've talked about tonight. Please jump onto Cyclescape and join in the conversation. And if you're not a member of Camcycle, please do think about joining us. Find out more on our website, camcycle.org.uk. I'll just say happy cycling and thanks for joining us. Good night.